When it comes to resilience, do you think the younger generation is more resilient or the older generation?
I don't know.
Tricky one.
I'm not quite sure.
Resilience is the ability to overcome obstacles in life. Today, we're going to interview some people from different nationalities, different religions, and different age groups. Do you think the younger generation is more resilient than older generations?
I think so, because probably the old generation is kind of stuck to they had to work in their young life. They had to work and they had to do everything to make money, to build something. We have more time to think about something. So I would say the older one.
I don't know. It's not obvious to me that they're more resilient, but I definitely wouldn't say they're less resilient either. I think the accusation that these people are snowflakes and they don't know how to deal with the harsher ends of life is not true. I think people's coping mechanisms have changed, and perhaps the way their resilience manifests is a display of vulnerability as perceived by older generations, but I don't think they are more vulnerable. In some ways, I think the kind of admission or the display of vulnerability is a type of resilience. It's their way of protecting themselves.
Would you call yourself a resilient person?
I think I've become more resilient over the years.
I mean, nowadays we have different obstacles, we have different, it's different than in the old days, I guess. And I would say the younger generations, I probably think differently than my grandparents, I always notice. So I'm not quite sure if we can say we're more resilient, around the same. It depends on the obstacles that we have to face.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think the risks and the situations are a lot different now for the younger generation compared to when maybe our grandparents were younger. What is maybe something that you face that maybe the older generations don't understand? Maybe it's social media, for example.
Obviously social media, but as well COVID. It's great that we have social media, but it has its positive and negative aspects as well. Yeah, and COVID as well was very hard, especially for the younger generations.
Do you think the younger generation or the older generation is better when it comes to resilience?
I think that it's not a matter of generation, because I think it's a personal thing, but also I think in this generation, because we are more into social media, we get into these circles. They're not so hopeful because they kind of give up on trying to make things better. Sometimes we feel helpless because we get bombarded with problems. Every day if you go and you find something horrible about the world, then you feel like you can't do anything.
Maybe they will say that we ignore our problems, but it is not that. We see the world, we want to make it better, but we have hope. We want to do things that we like. We want to be happy.
We can all start from doing something about ourselves, because if we all do something about ourselves, then everything will be okay.
I think it's a great point. Having hope is such a powerful thing. You can be in a really bad place, but if you have hope, you can get above it. And if you're in a really good place but have no hope, you will just keep going down.
I think probably the younger generation have to be more flexible. There's a perception that young people will give up a bit earlier than perhaps our generation, but I'm not sure if that's true.
Personally, I would say we're more resilient than the older generations, just simply because I think we've kind of managed to get more instruments and how to handle different and difficult situations. A lot of friends I know are in therapy and can talk to people, and it's just it's easier to handle different and difficult situations, I think.
I agree. I think the mental health topic is a way bigger topic than in the past, and David said, the therapy thing, and I think the resilience is a little bit stronger now than in the past.
Someone made the really good point about how the younger generation, they have more tools at their disposal. For example, therapy is a lot more common now. Even just speaking about their problems is a lot more common and accepted now as well. So because of those tools and those ways of doing things, they've become more resilient as well. And just like maybe how you were saying, because they're prepared to be more vulnerable and share the things that are going on, it doesn't necessarily mean they're more or less resilient. It's just a different way of showing it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I feel like I want to do my duty as a progressive liberal and say, yes, I agree with that take. I think, there might be something in the fact that previous generations believed in a kind of stoicism or a traditional way of doing things, which I can imagine also brings a type of resilience. So I don't want to dismiss that out of hand. But yeah, I think that's true. I think nowadays we have at least more of a conversation.
Do you think the younger generation is more resilient or the older generation?
I personally think the younger generation, just because I feel like we've had a lot more that we've had to go through in the time that we've been alive, where I feel like our parents' generation might have had a lot more handed to them or kind of planned out, and our generation has had to figure out a lot for themselves through like economic turmoil. COVID made a huge difference, so kind of, yeah.
The older generations, I think they look down on the newer generations and they think they always had it rougher, which I think it's up for debate. From my parents, which I know them the most from older generations, from what they tell to me, they started with nothing and they had to build their way up, which I find is very admirable. But also, I know people from older generations who had it all and had more opportunities than we have now in terms of economical growth.
Well, each generation has their own challenges, so and life's very different for the younger generation. The housing, various other bits and pieces. To some extent, our generation had it easier in that there was less, but it was more prescribed and you knew what you had ahead of you. So I would think it's about the same, to be honest. I think resilience probably levels out in its own way.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to continue to get crowd wisdom.